Hey y'all, and welcome to Politibrawl. My name is Brian, and JD Vance just destroys these Democrats who are trying to drag his name through the mud. This is what happens when a conservative goes to Yale. But before we dive into the video, I want to give a quick shout out over to our sponsors over at Native Path, who not only care about your health, but have the products to back it up, particularly their collagen powder. But more on that later. Now, let's get back into the video.
There's also been some criticisms of you. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg this evening spoke tonight. He took aim at one of your past comments from 2021, that Americans that don't have children have, quote, no physical commitment to the future of this country, unquote. I want you to take a listen and get your reaction.
You know, Senator, when I deployed to Afghanistan, I didn't have kids then. Many of the men and women who went outside the wire with me didn't have kids either. But let me tell you, our commitment to the future of this country was pretty damn physical.
What's your response?
Well, my response, Jake, is that Pete Buttigieg has taken a sarcastic remark that I made 3 years ago and turned it into something to distract from the fact that his leadership has seen higher transportation costs, higher fuel costs, and higher food prices for American citizens all over our country. These guys act so focused on a sarcastic quip that I made that they ignore the fact that under Kamala Harris's leadership, Americans can't afford the basic necessities of a good life in this country. And so I appreciate that Pete Buttigieg pretends to be offended by what I said. I think Pete should be offended by the fact that under his leadership as Secretary of Transportation, the government took in $8 billion to build 7 electric vehicle charging facilities at a time when Americans are paying 45% more for the gas that transports them to work. That's what we should be focused on, and that's what we should be talking about. And it illustrates, Jake, my entire criticism of the Democratic approach here is they're focused on fake issues instead of the real record. And the real record is that Kamala Harris has made this country poorer, Donald Trump made the middle class richer, and he caused a lot of peace and prosperity to break out in this country and all over the world. It's a very simple contrast, and I wish the Democrats would focus on the issues.
This is a fantastic line of attack. JD Vance doesn't go under the belt, he doesn't throw any rabbit punches, he stays smooth, he stays clean, and more importantly, he stays on topic. What is he talking about? Pete Buttigieg's record. And not to mention, he extrapolated the data, then talked about Kamala Harris's record. This is a fantastic way to handle criticism. Now, granted, the traditional way would be to thank Pete Buttigieg for his service, but I think the new way, and I wish JD Vance had done this, and said, well, I appreciate the fact that Pete Buttigieg went to war like I did. We have both served in the military. The unfortunate thing is I think that's the farthest extent of the good service that he has done, because he has done a disservice to his country. Even his job as mayor underwent a lot of scrutiny, but because he kissed the ring of Joe Biden, he got a nice juicy position where he has done just a very weak job in trying to get us to go to electric vehicles, which is an unviable idea for the majority of the country. But hey, whatever helps rich white liberals, you know? But there's more to this video, and it gets even better.
Take a listen to what Maryland Congressman Jamie Raskin said the other night about you.
And by the way, JD Vance, do you understand why there was a sudden job opening for running mate on the GOP ticket? They tried to kill your predecessor.
Do you have any reservations at all taking the ticket, taking the opportunity to serve as a vice presidential nominee, given what happened to Vice President Pence on January 6th?
No, not at all, Jake. And look, I can't help but laugh at what Jamie Raskin said. These are people who somehow always make themselves the victims. Jamie Raskin should be much more worried about the fact that there are a lot of Americans that can't afford to buy groceries, that can't afford to put their children in a nice home because of the policies that he has implemented and he has voted for. I just don't understand a person in American politics in 2024 who's whining about what happened to them instead of using their leadership and using their influence to make the lives of American citizens better. better. I have no reservations about taking this job because I know that if we make Donald J. Trump president of the United States, he's going to deliver rising wages, lower prices, and a secure border. That is all worth it for me, whatever the media or Jamie Raskin says about me.
Raskin is once again going back to towing the party line and doing anything he can to attack J.D. Vance. And what does J.D. Vance respond with? Actual policy. This is why you should send conservatives to Yale. They will at least give you more tools and equipment to argue. Although if you're good enough to get into Yale to begin with, maybe you really didn't need that education, but which came first, the chicken or the egg? But ultimately, J.D. Vance is being brilliant right here, because all he's talking about is policy. Things were better under Trump, whereas Jamie Raskin goes on this weird tirade about Mike Pence. Really? That's your line of attack? That Mike Pence was removed. They tried to unalive him. What are you talking about? Ugh. And the worst part is the SEALs at the DNC just stood there. Prize, please. Just clapping like seals at a circus. This is just wild and weird to me. But J.D. Vance does take it even one step farther in this next part of the clip.
I want to play some of what Governor Walz said during his speech, his acceptance speech earlier tonight, and get your reaction.
It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong, and it's dangerous.
Your reaction to that?
Well, when Donald Trump was president, Jake, you had people buying homes at record rates. You had young Americans who were able to afford to raise a family. You had people who could afford the basic trappings of middle-class life in this country. And so when Tim Walz says that Donald Trump's agenda doesn't work for middle-class Americans, he already was president for 4 years, and his agenda worked very well for middle-class Americans. Again, I just wish, I would love for Tim Walz or Kamala Harris or anybody else to say that during the 3.5 years that Kamala Harris was vice president, here is the thing that she did to make groceries more affordable. Here is the thing that she did to make it possible to raise a family in this country. Or here's the thing that she did to secure rather than open up the border. Because they can't talk about Kamala Harris's record, they're creating a phantom of Donald Trump's leadership. The Donald Trump that I know and that the American people know, I think, produced really good results for the American people. It's a record to be proud of and a record I'd like to get back to, frankly, because it was good for the American people.
Hey, y'all. I wanted to give a quick shout out to our new sponsors, Native Path. Created by Dr. Chad out of Austin, Texas, he realized that there was something deeply wrong in this medical community. And instead of focusing on nutrition, they were just focused on serving Big Pharma. So he left and created this new company called Native Path. And what do they do over there? They sell something called collagen. Now, what is collagen? Well, it's not magic fairy dust. It's not this muscle milk. It's not calcium rich. Instead, it is an odorless, flavorless, dissolves completely in water powder that you can mix. And unlike iocane powder, this stuff has massive health benefits. It can help your bones, your joints, your ligaments, your skin, your hair follicles, even your fingernails. This stuff is absolutely packed with the nutrients that we lose so constantly in our modern diet. This stuff is a fantastic supplement, can help you live a healthier life. And if you go to this link down here below, you will find up to 45% off of certain products. That is how much Native Path cares about your health. So go check them out, link in the description below. And now, back to regularly scheduled programming. This is why he's Donald Trump's running mate. Vance was well-spoken, he gave answers perfectly, he talked about policy, and he reminded the viewers of CNN that the Democrats have done nothing to help out the average American. All right, the best thing that they did under Joe Biden was a stimulus bill that pushed us over the cliff. All right, automatically not a good thing. And then the CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act was only done because that was a national emergency. And the reason behind that, a brief tangent here, is that Taiwan, China, they're about to go into a conflict. The majority of our superconductors come from either Taiwan or China, and superconductors are basically these little chips that make everything run. And thus, they are needed in all of our devices, our phones, our computers. And so if we produce them here in America, it's going to be better in the long run. So that was the best the Democrats could do. Instead of the tax cuts that led to a booming economy, economic opportunity zones that helped out poor Americans, historic funding for HBCUs, everything was better under Trump. And that's all J.D. Vance had to say in this clip. But he takes it one step farther and reminds them that under Harris, the Democrats did nothing. And by the way, if we're comparing vice presidential picks, you have a man who went to Yale, who grew up in a broken home, served in the military, wrote a fantastic book about his life and how hard it is in rural America, a man who was able to pull himself up and make the American dream, versus a dude from the Midwest who for some reason thinks that being a Democrat's a cool thing. Really, that's it. Seriously, what is the what's the appeal of Tim Walz? What's his appeal? I'll tell you what it is. It's just this nice old Midwestern guy who votes Democrat because he cares more about his feelings than he does policy. He cannot compare to J.D. Vance. He hasn't struggled like Vance. And furthermore, there's a darn good chance that man's a communist. I mean, he taught in communist China, and I think he had his wedding on the day that Mao's revolution finally came to fruition. Don't quote me on that, but I do remember some weird quote by his wife that she wanted a memorable day, so she picked a very communist day. Again, I think it was linked to Mao and the win of the Chinese Revolution and the Chinese Communists. So he might be a closeted communist here, folks. So that's what we have to choose between. An American legend, and I don't use it lightly. I truly mean this man espouses the ideas of the American ideal. And that's what J.D. Vance is, versus a man who just kind of went through the motions and got lucky. I'm choosing J.D. Vance on this one, and I hope y'all do the same in November. Folks, my name is Brian. Hope you enjoyed this segment here on Politibrawl. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Catch you on the next one. And until then, y'all have a good one.